Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on how to build credibility when you're speaking, how to build credibility when you're presenting, how to build credibility when you're facilitating or training. Peter Dew's my name, and I know some of you know me, but some of you don't know me. We'll get the screen back up in a moment. My passion is helping people find their voice so that they can get their message across confidently and effectively. So you can influence people, you can persuade, you can get the knowledge to those people who need. And indeed, credibility, today's webinar, credibility is one of those things that's going to help you connect and be present and effective for the people who need your message, whether it's safety, whether it's financial planning, whether it's around change management, different way of thinking, new policies, procedures. Your credibility to ask people to do something differently is really important. How to participate in webinars? Please ask questions as we go. Don't wait for me to stop and pause at any time. Take notes and apply the stuff, the information I'm giving you to your own situation. So the next time you're about to present, what are you going to use from today to increase your credibility, to be more credible? Or when you look back at a recent presentation or a recent workshop that you delivered, what could have you done to enhance that credibility? That's the purpose of today's workshop. So please don't just listen and take notes and then do nothing. It's about listening, taking notes, and then doing something in your own communication, your own presentation skills, style. This is my little formula around having an impactful and influential and effective presentation. You need good content. Content is king. You need that rapport. You need to connect with the audience. You need to be confident or appear to be confident. And of course, today's part of the formula is credibility. Any one of those is lacking, then I think your presentation impact will suffer. So how can you build credibility? So let's start with some hard truths. Credibility is assigned by the group, by your audience. It's not assigned by how credible you think you are. It's not assigned by the fact that you think you've done all the things. If the group feels you weren't credible, if the audience decides you were not credible, then you may not have impact. Welcome to those just joining. We've just got underway. So starting talking about credibility, we need credibility to have impact. We need credibility to create change, to create movement, to create a different way of thinking. But if the audience does not see us as credible, then we may not have the impact. So the key of this webinar is, what can we do to enhance our credibility? That's what I want to cover in the next 25 minutes. Where does your credibility come from? Luckily, it doesn't come from just one thing. I've got a PhD, I've got a master's, I've worked in this profession for 20 years. It's everything you do, including your non-verbals, including your image, including referencing your data, your information. It's multiple layers of evidence. Sometimes we need to borrow credibility. We need to look at what other people are doing, other experts, other universities, other studies, other research, and that may support our new position. That may support what we're asking people to do. So it's multiple layers. And we give it the term your credibility stack. So let's build your credibility stack. Let's not rest on one thing. Some things that you can do to build credibility. First impressions count. The handshake, matching and mirroring the handshaking, the smile. Are you pleased to be there? Are you dressed appropriately? I was doing work in Bendigo last week, and before every presentation I checked in with the workshop organizer who was bringing me on. Will anyone in the room be wearing a tie? Now, I wear a coat and I carry a tie in my suitcase. Most of my workshops, a smart shirt and dressy trousers are sufficient, but I can put my coat on and just go up another layer of professionalism, and I can also put the tie on if I know there's going to be executives, accountants or lawyers in the room. When I do keynote speaking, I will put the tie on. It's expected of me. So first impressions count if you want to be seen as credible. If there's a mismatch between your first impressions and your message, your role, your credibility may suffer. And you can overdress. You can overdress. The rule is be the smartest dressed person in the room, but just a little bit. So match the smartest dressed person in the room and just be a little bit more dressier than them. If you're really well dressed, suit, tie, as in the picture, and you're speaking to a group of workers at a construction site, there's going to be a mismatch. And you've seen the CEOs, you've seen all the executives, the Twiggy Forrest, the Andrew Forrest, when they're on site, they dress down. Your experience will give you credibility, the problems you've solved, the case studies you've worked on. Your experience, how many years, where, multicultural experience, multinational experience. Do you know the difference between your curriculum vitae and your resume? I know they're used interchangeably within Australia, but your CV is your curriculum vitae, your curriculum of life. So CV is everything you've done, including for me growing up on a farm, working in a timber mill, working in pathology, becoming a laboratory manager. Your resume is a subset of your CV that you put forward when you're applying for a job that best demonstrates your credibility for that particular job. So when I'm applying for a manager within the health department, I don't put working in a timber mill or being a farmer's son in my resume. So pick the right experience, your own struggle, your own journey, your own successes, your own failures. Nothing wrong with failures, it's the lessons that you learnt in failures, those projects that didn't quite work out right, and then you choose the subset of that to put forward to give you credibility on the topic of which you're speaking. Where does your data come from? Important that you have a credible data source. Clinical trials, UNESCO, Australian Bureau of Statistics, your professional bodies, engineering bodies, medical bodies, scientific bodies, journals. Where does your data come from? I was at a seminar a while back and it was speaking about a topic that's in the news and very pertinent at the moment, and that's family violence or domestic violence. And of course, Rosie Batty has put family violence on the map in Australia and is taking it around the world. Very powerful speaker. Not Rosie, but someone else stood up and said, did you know that every week in Australia, every week, 1 to 2 people lose their life. 1 to 2 women lose their life as a result of violence from their partner. Mostly men, but occasionally female partners. Every week, 1 to 2 women in Australia lose their life as a result of violence from their partner. Someone said, wow, that's a lot. Where did you get the data from? And the response was, look, I don't know. I just heard it somewhere. It's true. You can see how the credibility of what that person was saying just suffered a little bit because they pulled a figure out of the air and I don't know where it came from. I've certainly heard similar figures myself on TV. I know it's a bad problem. It's an embarrassing problem for Australia. It shouldn't happen. Where does your data come from? If you don't have credible data, people may not buy your message. Any questions? I'm just going to pause for a moment and grab a drink of water. Any questions about those early strategies for developing credibility? What if you're working in a new industry and there isn't a lot of data at the moment? Then I guess with clinical trials, as they're developing new drugs, so there isn't a lot of data, they have to do the research, and sometimes it takes 10 years to launch a new drug because the clinical trials take that long or they're not successful. So I guess if it's a different way of thinking, then maybe data's not what you're going to put your credibility on. Maybe you're going to use some case studies or some other information. Maybe they're doing the same thing in Canada with success. And although there's not a lot of data, you're just reporting what's happening within Canada. So you borrow that credibility from somewhere else if you don't have data in a new area, in a new idea, in a new scientific area. Okay, moving on. Write and publish. This gives you credibility. If you're scientific, if you're engineering, if you work in environment, do you publish to your journals? Write a book, write a blog post. Are you known in your field as an expert in that area? Do you write on your LinkedIn? A lot of people have LinkedIn profiles, but do you contribute to discussions? Do you post in your area of expertise, HR strategies, employee engagement? These are articles for journals, articles for LinkedIn, podcasts. Write and publish, and you'll be known as an expert in that area, and that gives you credibility. Some examples: I blog regularly. Preparation is the key to public speaking. You'll see my blog on my website. I also post often on LinkedIn, and I'll repurpose the blog or I'll use the same blog post occasionally because different audiences. I've got a couple of books. Those of you who've been to my workshops know that I've written a book, 7 Steps to Overcome Your Fear of Public Speaking, and I've written a book, a workbook and an audio CD on how to write a speech. Further credibility comes from testimonials. In my area, I do workshops and keynote speaking. It's the people who write and tell me that I've done a good job. And there's a new field that I haven't got into yet. It's called video testimonials. When someone comes up and thanks you for a great presentation or that helpful information, ask them will they give you a quick video testimonial and just record it on your phone. Get in the media. Be someone that people go to in the media. I was recently on TV when Channel 9 ran a story about our Premier, Colin Barnett in Perth, being a little bit grumpy, and they wanted someone to look at his body language. And so I was on TV commenting on our Premier's body language, and some of the rolling of the eyes, he was passive aggressive. He was not in a good place, and simple things he could do to come across more engaging. When you get in the media, then you can build credibility. Use your client success stories, those clients that have moved through that hardship, that have overcome that adversity, that have stopped their staff turnover, that have increased their productivity. All of this adds to your credibility. I mentioned before, sometimes you need to borrow credibility. If you're new in a field, maybe someone else has already done the research. Maybe somebody else is proposing the same position that you're asking people to adopt. So if you were teaching people to take responsibility, You're responsible for your own life. Don't blame other people. Don't play the victim mentality. Take responsibility. I have seen someone borrow Stephen Covey, and Stephen Covey defines responsible as response able. And no matter what happens to you, no matter what people do to you, you get overlooked for the promotion, you get made redundant, there's a restructure, you are responsible. You have the ability to respond to that scenario, to those events that happen to you. So take responsibility for your own life. So when you borrow someone from an expert, I talk about fear of public speaking, and I let some of the people know that fear will probably never go away. And I use a quote from Mark Twain, that great American author, the author of Huckleberry Finn and other books. Mark Twain said there's two kinds of speakers in the world, those that are nervous and those that are bloody liars. So what Mark Twain's saying is everyone's nervous, and if you're not nervous before speaking, then you're probably lying. You're not being truthful. So I've borrowed that quotation from Mark Twain to support my own proposition, which is nervousness may never go away in public speaking. How do you overcome your nerves before public speaking? It could be that you won't overcome your nerves, and it could be that you don't have to overcome your nerves. It's about learning to accept those nerves as you speak. Borrow Mark Twain, and all of a sudden I've layered some credibility onto what I'm saying. Stephen Covey also said, seek first to understand and then to be understood. So we need to listen to people, and my wife might use this in difficult conversations. One of the keys to difficult conversations is listening and understanding. In the FBI negotiation model, listening, empathic listening, is the base of the hostage negotiation model that the FBI uses. Then they build empathy, then they build rapport, then they move on to change management. So many people in difficult conversations think that we're right, you're wrong, and put my point of view, but I haven't taken the time to understand your position or how you reached that understanding, which in my view is not quite right. So let's understand, seek first to understand others, and then we can start to put our point forward and be understood. Borrowed credibility. Alignment is key. Your persona, your attitude needs to align up with your message. Are you genuine and are you authentic? Does that come through? Are you who you say you are? People can Google. People can check your profile on LinkedIn. Make sure that you are who you say you are. We're seeing more and more cases in the newspaper of people that are getting jobs, and later on they found out that they faked their CV or their resume, or they can't do in fact what they've said they can do. Don't fake your credibility. You can fake your confidence. You can pretend not to be nervous and have that fake confident persona. That's okay according to Amy Cuddy. But don't fake your content, don't fake your credibility, don't pretend you know the audience. Pouzes and Costner in the Leadership Challenge found that honesty is the #1 trait that employees and workers admire, look for in their leadership, in their managers. They want honest leaders, they want honest managers. So be genuine and authentic and make sure you're aligned. Another saying that I give with people is when you're giving a message or when you're proposing a change management proposition or you're giving new information, the first sale must be to yourself. In other words, do you buy your own message? Do you believe what you're saying? If you don't, the audience won't buy your message either. And this is the alignment, the genuine, authentic, the authentic and honest self that you bring to the platform when you're speaking, training, or running a workshop. Just going to pause for a moment before I move on to non-verbal communication. Are there any questions so far? I've spoken about borrowed credibility. Where could you get some credibility from? Where could you borrow credibility to add credibility to what you're saying? You can publish and you can author. First impressions count. Yeah, you can borrow credibility from other colleagues in different industries. Yes, that's a good point. So if you're working for Rio Tinto or BHP and another mining company in Canada or USA has achieved a similar success, and you use that as a case study and you're now proposing that we do something different in BHP or Rio Tinto, and people are saying, well, I don't think that'll work, you've then got that credibility to go back to a different company in the same sector. So non-verbal communication. It's about alignment as well, and it's about first impressions. So, but credibility is when you're sending that information. So here's a wonderful little table. I forgot to mention in my introduction, if anyone has any questions after the webinar or you want a copy of my slides, please send me an email and I can forward it to you. I also record my webinars. So after today, if you want to review the webinar and you haven't had time to take down this particular slide, which is really valuable, comes from Michael Grinder. When you're credible, the head is held still. When you're approachable, nice, let's have a conversation, your head bobs up and down. Our previous Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, bobbed her head up and down quite a lot and didn't always enjoy the credibility or the connection with the Australian people that perhaps she deserved. Steady voice when you want to be credible. The voice that fluctuates up and down, rise and fall is lovely and nice and approachable, but it's not all that credible. The intonation, the downturn at the end of the sentence or the inflection up, which is common with Australians. We love to put that inflection up. Palms up. So you're standing before a group of people, put your palms up. Hey, I'm really pleased to be here. I want to share some information with you. Palms down, voice changes. This is the 4-step process that I think. The frozen eye, less blinking. Julie Bishop, sometimes when she's doing those tough interviews, that frozen eye, you get the stare from Julie Bishop and you understand she's becoming really credible. The blinking of the eye makes you more approachable. All I'm saying is to build your credibility, it's important to, I guess, enhance these things and do less of this. I'm not saying that there's not times when you need to be approachable. So when people first come into my workshop, they don't know who I am. So I need to be approachable. I need to start to connect and build rapport. So I will do the approachable non-verbal communication. But when I'm asking them or telling them the steps to become more confident, what to do with their non-verbal communication, I need to become more credible. Otherwise, my message may not have the same impact. Are there any questions on that slide? I'll just backtrack. Any questions? So I've got a question for the palms. Is it a 180-degree change, facing up and then facing down? It doesn't have to be 180 degrees. So when you're starting a presentation, when you're greeting people, where do your hands go? If your hands are facing up, then you might, to become credible, you might turn them 90 degrees. So they're now straight, they're now vertical up and down. The movement from that to vertical makes you more credible. You'll find that men tend to do 180 and women are less comfortable going a full 180 degrees. Some men, when they're being approachable, their palms are vertical, straight up and down. They're not facing up, they're vertical. So to become credible, yes, they turn their palms so they're facing down. So you kind of calibrate a little bit. It's not black and white that your palms are parallel facing up, and then you turn them 180 and then face down to become credible. Just a 90-degree change from wherever you find your approachable hand gesture is, 90 degrees change. If that suits you, if that's natural for you, makes you look and appear and sound more credible. Good comment. Moving on, 5 minutes to go. Use language and stories, case studies that your audience can understand. This demonstrates your preparation. This demonstrates that you've taken time to know your audience. So what do I mean by that? Have a shared interest with the people in the room. I have a friend, his name's Glenn Capelli, and he speaks all around Australia. He's a school teacher, and he talks about leadership, and he talks about education and learning. He's really passionate about learning. When he gets before a mining group, BHP, Rio, Chevron, how does a school teacher build credibility, use the right language with the mining, oil and gas sector? So he uses his shared interest. He grew up and was educated in Kalgoorlie, Western Australia, gold mining. And he talks about what it's like being in a mining town. That helps build credibility and helps connect. Use the right language, the right jargon. Tell the right stories. One of the things when I do my storytelling workshops is I get people to build a bank of stories, the stories that illustrate points, case studies, and then I give them to kind of color it. Will you use that story for the mining sector? Will you use that story for the finance, banking, accounting sector? If you train across sectors, would you use that story for the disability, the health sector? And having the right stories for the right audience can give you great credibility. Using the relevant data or evidence and using the right case studies. So this is using the right language. Speaking your audience's language gives you credibility. So my call to action today is how you're going to build your credibility stack. From those tools I've taught you, what one or two things can you use for your next presentation, or reflecting back to a previous presentation, what one or two things could have you done to add more credibility, to make you be more credible? In fact, I'll open that up. What are some things you could do to add credibility to your next presentation? Just type them in the question dialog box. That would be great. Some of the things, reference my data. Yes. World Health, UNESCO, Australian Bureau of Statistics, reputable data, depending on what you're working with. Family Planning Association of Western Australia. If you're talking about aged care, then organisation like Advocare WA has a lot of data and information around ageing and aged care. Yep, you can use more data. You can use your non-verbal communication, so that's palms up, palms down, to be more credible. And you know when you need to be credible, and you know when you need to be approachable. All right, wrapping up. I've got some workshops coming up. I know some of you are in Perth, some of you are in Melbourne. I don't have any Melbourne workshops yet, but Bunbury and Perth, you'll find these on my website, /events, so peterdew.com.au/events. This week in Perth, Difficult Conversations is going ahead, and Thinking and Speaking Off the Cuff is full. That's impromptu speaking. But we've got some of those workshops coming up in the future. So July is Thinking and Speaking Off the Cuff in Perth. And if you did want a workshop within your organisation, I'm going up to Rio Tinto on the 13th of May, doing an in-house workshop for them. Let me know. Next webinar, how to use the platform. Monday the 2nd of May. So you're before a group of people, but how do you use the platform rather than standing behind the lectern? Any last questions? And I will